We're going to go ahead and start. We'll add Kent when he joins in. Okay, this is the City Council regular meeting, 6:34 p.m., Tuesday, April 21st, 2020. Meeting accessibility. Pursuant to the Governor's Emergency Proclamation 2025, the city is unable to provide an in-person location for the public to listen to the virtual city meeting this evening. Meetings are still accessible to the public, and public comment is able to be submitted. To view live, city website is www.sammamish.us/news/events/TV-21/. City Facebook, www.facebook.com/City of Sammamish, WA/. Comcast, Channel 21 is within the Sammamish only. To view later, videos are available the day after the meeting. You can go to the city website or to YouTube, which is www.youtube.com/COUPZIMSUDHADGIRILC8A. Woo. And again, Comcast is available within the Sammamish only. So first thing up, we're going to call order. And Mike, want to do roll call?
Mayor Karen Moran.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Christy Malchow.
Present.
Councilmember Ken Gamblin.
Here.
Councilmember Jason Ritchie.
Here.
Councilmember Chris Ross.
Present.
Councilmember Pamela Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Kent Treen.
Present.
And we also have some staff on the call, including the interim city manager, Dave Rudat, Andrew Stevens, Andrew Zagars, Cheryl Paston, and let me see here, David Pyle, Jim Hominick, Lisa Marshall, Lita Hatchie, and Rita Bod. I think that's everybody.
Great.
And myself, Mike Sugg.
Okay, next we have the Pledge of Allegiance. If everybody would please join me, and Mike, you did such a great job last week.
I pledge allegiance to the flag.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next we have approval of the agenda. I have the approval. I would like to add to amend the agenda to discuss the adoption of an emergency ordinance regarding a development moratorium.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay. All those in favor of that amendment, say aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that is a 7-0. Does anybody have any other amendments to the agenda they'd like to make?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I would like to expand or add an executive session topic. Lisa advised me, do I just add to the existing executive session to expand the scope, or do I add a separate?
Councilmember Ross, it depends on the reason for the executive session. If it falls within one of the stated reasons in the agenda, under, then you don't need to add an item.
Okay, I'd like to add potential litigation, because I'm hearing a lot of sound in the background. I'd like to add potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101I.
1-5?
1I.
Oh,
It's already on there.
I second.
any discussion?
Yeah, this is Jason. It looks like that's already under executive session under the second, there's a big red asterisk after that under the second executive session. Is that what we're talking about? Or that's the same number, 42, 30, 110, 1I, right?
Maybe my version is not updated. Mine's just potential land acquisition.
Yeah, there's a second one on there. You might just refresh. Yep, we already got it, I think, unless there's something additional.
Perfect.
I confirm.
Okay, it is on there.
Thank you. Okay, thank
It
you.
is on the one I have. Okay.
Richie.
Any other changes or additions or changes to the agenda proposed?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I would like to add an item to discuss additional funding for human services.
Additional funding for, and I only heard part of that.
Human
Oh,
services.
human services, okay.
Does that require a second?
Yep.
Second.
Okay, so let's put that,
Karen, we have to vote on it before it's on the agenda.
okay, discussion?
I'd like
Yeah,
to and about what we're going.
Hearing no, all those in favor, is there discussion?
Yeah.
Can Councilor Stewart speak to her motion?
Sure.
Sure. I just would like to, we briefly discussed possibly ensuring that some unspent money, make sure it's allocated. I would also like to discuss whether we want to try to assist the human services organizations that are expending additional money and are having shortfalls in their donations right now to assist. Every other city surrounding us on the east side has contributed additional funds, and I think we should have a discussion about it.
I don't know. This is Chris. I think that's the intention's excellent, and I support the outreach. But I do think this would be appropriate for staff to help us understand how much money is available and give us recommendations into what organizations. So we
can direct staff to do so.
What's that?
I said we can have the discussion, and that can be the outcome to direct staff. Yeah, but
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? Say nay. Okay, 7-0. Okay, so we need to, let's put it, under unfinished. So we're going to make it 10.5. Okay, we still haven't approved the consent calendar, folks, so, or we still haven't approved the agenda. So any other changes to the agenda? Do you have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda
As amended.
as amended.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second, but anyway.
Any more discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? 7-0. Great. Okay, next on the agenda is emergency management. And we're going to hear lots of good stuff, right?
Yeah, definitely.
You can tell us we can all go out and play next week? Okay.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, city manager. My name is Andrew Stevens. I'm the emergency manager for the city of Sammamish with Eastside Fire and Rescue. Thank you again for allowing me the opportunity to provide a brief situational update regarding the COVID-19 pandemic and response. As of earlier today, the number of confirmed cases of coronavirus globally was over 2.5 million. At over 820,000 cases, the United States makes up roughly a third of that total. Cases in Washington are still on the increase, with 12,282 cases as of today statewide and 5,360 in King County alone. In Sammamish, there have been 59 positive cases and unfortunately 3 fatalities. However, Sammamish's per capita rate of 91.6 cases per 100,000 is the lowest in King County outside of the small jurisdictions of Hunts Point with a population of 437 and Skykomish with a population of only 222. The low rate of transmission and contraction of the virus in Sammamish is a testament of our population's willingness to comply with all public health recommendations and non-pharmaceutical interventions. Most importantly, being social distancing. Our community has been able to demonstrate considerable resiliency throughout the past 7 weeks. However, it is not time to relax or to become complacent in those efforts. Public health experts are recommending that these non-pharmaceutical orders currently in place remain in effect until either 1, a vaccine or preventative treatment is made widely available, or 2, the following conditions are met. Healthcare professionals have all required and necessary personal protective equipment to safely treat patients. There is a sustained reduction of new COVID-19 cases for at least 2 weeks. The disease can be controlled through monitored isolation and quarantine, and community spread no longer exists. That widespread testing and the ability to obtain rapid results is also present. That robust contact tracing between patients and exposures is available, and that jurisdictions have the ability to protect their most vulnerable populations, such as those in congregate care facilities. Now, understanding that these conditions may not be present or even available for many more months, all levels of government are working to develop mitigating strategies to reduce the medical, economic, social, and civil disruptions resulting from the prolonged non-pharmaceutical interventions. An example of these mitigations would be the distribution of financial assistance, economic support to small businesses, and to support of programs that encourage mental wellness of impacted individuals, and more. The city of Sammamish has and continues to lean forward in support of these efforts to mitigate the impacts of not just the virus, but also the continual strain of these necessary interventions. The city is not only focusing on supporting these efforts locally, but also in supporting and assisting the coordination of vital services across the county. City staff are in constant contact with community-based organizations and nonprofits who are working tirelessly to support those who are impacted, both connecting them to resources and also identifying ways to connect them to funding and regional grant opportunities. The city is also partnering with communities across the county to develop a GIS restaurant map, which will highlight essential businesses that are still open and able to serve or deliver food to our populations. And recently, I was requested to support King County's COVID-19 response by leading a team focused on the continuity of staffing of regional food banks and distribution hubs. As new ways to assist those impacted by the pandemic continue to be developed and refined, the city is committed to supporting and sharing this information to our residents through the constant provision of communication on numerous platforms and in numerous languages. Our objective is to ensure that residents are well informed on how to protect themselves from this virus, but also aware of the numerous resources available to aid them throughout these difficult times. Now, there may be frustrations with the continuation of these mitigation strategies, and there may be also those who claim that they are overreaction or an overstepping of government. So to those individuals, may I please remind them that even with the strictest mitigation measures in place, roughly 45,000 Americans have already died from coronavirus. Throughout the past 2 months, There were many days where the daily death totals from COVID-19 were far greater than the total losses this nation experienced during the 9/11 terrorist attacks. The importance of continuing these mitigations until they can be safely and slowly rolled back cannot be understated. While difficult, this community can rally together to ensure that we all make it through this response, though. We can support one another, we can support our businesses when they eventually reopen, and we can support the nonprofits providing assistance and food banks providing meals. We can also do our part to protect the frontline workers who are putting their lives at risk every day by simply staying home. Thank you, and I would now be open to answer any questions or comments you may have.
Oh, excellent, a lot of information. Council, do we have any questions?
I have one. I'm sorry.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, I had asked an email. Is it possible for us to get, I know that you have the EOC, is it possible for us to get weekly reports from that? To have the information as well?
Sorry, which weekly reports are you referring to, Councilmember?
Just to find out, I'm not even aware of what information is available in the Emergency Operations Center. So I think knowing what information is available there and to get some reporting on that would be really helpful.
We can definitely do that.
Thank you.
And then I had a question. I know the governor had a meeting today of some kind. Can you give us an update on what was said there?
Yes, at 1700 tonight, the governor had a press briefing, not really a briefing, but more of a statement regarding this long-term recovery. Just kind of speaking to some of the same points that I was addressing, that this is going to be a marathon and not a sprint. They are actively looking at ways that they can roll back some of these non-pharmaceutical interventions to start removing the cog of business and reopening some essential, non-essential services, but they have to do that in a way that's really done safely and slowly, because it's quite evident in some countries that have opened up too quickly, they've seen a large resurgence in the virus. So they're talking about these efforts, not only how they're going to go about looking at it strategically, using science, using statistics, but also the different mitigations that are going to do to reduce the stress of continuing these for a long time. So more economic support, more business support, more support for community-based organizations, faith-based groups, food banks, and so forth. Kind of a multi-pronged approach.
Madam Mayor, I have a question.
Okay, that would be Councilmember Treen.
Yeah, thank you. Andrew Stevens, so one of the things, because you're talking about long-term, do you have any accurate information for either King County or the state of Washington on testing?
I do not.
And the availability of testing.
Right now, I believe statewide, they're able to push out about 4,000 to 5,000 tests a day to process those. During the governor's briefing tonight, he expressed a need to really be able to do 20,000 to 30,000 tests a day, to where we can get to a point of the level of contact tracing that we would need across the state and across the region to slow things down. Our labs, our medical health labs, actually have more testing ability than we have supplies to conduct those testing. So that's one of the reasons why Governor Inslee wrote a letter to the president today requesting a greater assistance on obtaining those supplies, whether it's cultures or swabs or specimen vials, to be able to do more tests, because right now we have the ability, we just don't have the resources to ramp those up statewide.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Council?
Madam Mayor, Ken Gamblin.
Yes, I see Councilmember Gamblin.
You got it. Hey, I just wanted to take a moment and thank Andrew for the amazing amount of work he's putting in, the hours he's doing. And I was wondering if you could pass on our thanks to all the folks he's working with at EFR and all the other first responders. It's an amazing job. It must be kind of hairy out there. It's definitely a little risky out there. And we just want to let him know that his work and time is appreciated. And if you could communicate that to the others he's working with, we'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Will do. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Council, seeing nothing else or hearing nothing else, we'll move on. Thank you for a great report. And do we want to do an executive session in the front? Okay. All right.
Did we?
Pardon?
Sir, did I miss? I said, did we pass the consent calendar? I know we did the.
Yeah.
Okay.
Move to
haven't
approve the
gotten to there. We're going
consent
to public
agenda.
comment. Okay, next is public comment. Pursuant to the Governor's Emergency Proclamation 2025, the city is unable to provide an in-person location to the public to listen to the virtual city council meeting this evening. Meetings are still accessible to the public and public comment is still able to be submitted. Written public comment will be accepted until 5 p.m. on the day of the meeting. Submit your written comments by email to the city clerk at manderson@sammamish.us and citycouncil@sammamish.us. Verbal comments. Up to 3 minutes of verbal public comments may be provided per person live during the meeting. Call the following number and input the access code when prompted by 6:30 p.m. the day of the meeting. The phone number is 1-571-317-3122. The access code is 929-348-197. Once you have joined, you will be placed on mute, and then the meeting operator will unmute when it is your turn to comment. Now I'm going to turn this over to Mike so he can rotate through our callers.
Great. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I see we have two people who have called in to provide public comment this evening. They're both on mute right now, and I will unmute them in the order in which they joined the meeting. So we'll start with caller 1 and then go to caller 2. When you are unmuted, as the mayor mentioned, you will have 3 minutes to provide comment. At the end of the 3 minutes, you will hear a beeping tone indicating that you are out of time. Please start your comment by stating your name and the city you live in for the record. And I will now go ahead and unmute the first caller. All right, you should be unmuted. Can you hear me, first caller?
Am I the first caller, Mike?
I think that is you, Mr. Valderrama.
All right. Well, then I'll get started. Romero Valderrama from Sammamish. Yesterday, the Growth Hearing Board invalidated the concurrency standards of the City of Sammamish for violating the GMA. The board stated that they find and conclude that the continued validity of that ordinance in its adoption of the corridor LOS through the SMC substantially interfere with the fulfillment of the GMA Planning Goals 10 and 12 and therefore imposes invalidity on it. You now, I am sure, in the executive session will be talking about this invalidation. Now we just learned that you're going to be discussing another moratorium and remind the council that you have many times been told that every time you put a moratorium on, that you put the city and its taxpayers at risk. Given the number of times we've had this over the last number of years, I ask you to adhere to that. I also remind you that you need to be careful to avoid the knee-jerk reaction. The council, when the volume over capacity methodology was first proposed, we heard that it needed to be done thoughtfully via the Planning Commission in harmony, accordance with the comprehensive plan, as again cited by the Growth Management Hearing Board. I also want to remind the council of that testimony and how that became a knee-jerk reaction and did not mesh with what was taking place as far as being erroneous. It did not measure under a logical engineering or fundamental logic that capacity being less, and it was 48% less than the number of the actual capacity that was shown. Over the last few weeks, the council has also signaled its intention to appeal the decision and authorize the additional $150,000 for the ECLIC firm to advise on the GMA and land use issues after it expressly stated that the firm would not work on the Jaron case. Yet 2 days later, you approved another $100,000 to take on the Jaron case from the Madrona firm, even though as part of the appeal, this new firm cannot argue any new arguments in that appeal. The new firm cannot change the city-approved positions that were presented at the hearing, and neither can it change what the law actually states. So this means the citizens of Sammamish, at a time of most of the economy shut down and unemployment in double digits, will unnecessarily be footing another $150,000 in legal fees, plus what you're now adding on with the consideration of another moratorium taking place. All of this being done at a time of crisis when the citizens and businesses of our city are in increasing need, and the council has yet to react. Oh, I've got extra time to support the needs of those citizens in a time of crisis. So I ask you all to please support our citizens and very carefully about anything you're going to do with a moratorium and the cost.
Great. Oh, perfect timing again.
All right.
I'm working on it.
All right, let's move to caller number 2. I will unmute this caller now. Caller number 2, can you hear me?
Yes. This is Deb Sogi, the CEO of the Sammamish Chamber and the manager of the Sammamish Farmers Market. And first of all, I want to thank Andrew because he's done a great job of communicating with us, the chamber, so I can forward it to businesses. And with his information, FEMA and several others, we've been able to help the businesses quite a bit, although they are struggling and feeling a lot of pain right now. Everyone is concerned, of course, about the pandemic. And as far as that goes, that's why we've planned a safe farmers market. And I sent the council last week all the details about the ways in which we're going to have a safe farmers market. The farmers markets around us and ours, including Issaquah's, are in compliance with the King County Public Health COVID-19 requirements to provide only the essential food. And as you know, essential food from farmers is important to all of us so that the farmers can still be in business and the farmers can provide fresh, less handled food to us. There's no distribution like there is to grocery stores. Our plan includes no gathering, social distancing between vendor booths, customers, and a limitation to the amount of customers who can shop and line up. We will have at least the same amount of precautionary methods, if not more, than grocery stores. The food will come directly from the farmer. It will not be handled by the public and go directly to the consumer as they point to what they want. We will not allow prepared and cooked food to be at the venue. Only packaged food, including the bakery items, and fruits and vegetables and farm-made soap will be sold. We will not allow any entertainment or tables to encourage gathering. The customers will simply shop while vendors will pick up the food and place into the bag for them. The vendors will be spaced apart to allow for social distancing at the front of the market, which is the only entrance and exit not blocked. Each customer will be led in one at a time. The utmost safety with our people monitors in place at the market will be provided to make sure of that. We have answered all of the King County public health requirements, and that was sent to the council by email. Farmers market fees have been paid, and planning for the vendors and farmers markets has been planned since January. Finding and relocating farmers markets to a private church or a school property is something we are looking at, but it's very costly. Do I get 5 minutes? Okay.
No,
so it's very
it's 3 minutes for everybody.
Oh, okay. So anyway, I hope you will reconsider it. and open the approved special modified market at the City Hall. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I see we have one more caller who has joined us. I will unmute them now. Please state your name and the city you live in for the record. Caller number 3, can you hear us?
Hi, Ken. This is Tom Hornish from the great city of Sammamish. I wanted to check in on follow up Mr. Valderrama's comments. I think we must be reading different opinions in different orders. I guess I would advise the council to get some very good legal advice as to what this Growth Management Hearing Board decision really says. And it is convoluted and hard to read and understand. But my read on it is that what was done was not done correctly in the process, but can be corrected. So I would just advise and suggest that the council get good legal advice and move forward. So I'm not even going to take close to my 3 minutes. I will leave it at that. Thanks very much.
Good to hear from you. Thank you. Okay, I think that is the end of public comment. Next on the agenda is the consent calendar.
Move to adopt.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we have a first and a second. All those in favor of approval of the consent calendar, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Entering. Okay, 6-1. Okay, so we've got on to unfinished business. The unfinished business is the emergency ordinance, and I am going to turn that over to... Who's doing the... Dave, are you doing the... Okay, I'm turning that over to our interim city manager.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. On April 14th, 2020, the City Council discussed whether to consider extending Tent City 4's temporary homeless encampment permit due to the COVID-19 emergency. The council determined they would like to grant a 30-day extension as requested by Mary Queen of Peace, and directed staff to return on April 21st, 2020 with an emergency ordinance to do so. That emergency ordinance is included as Exhibit 1 in your packet. The background here is that Tent City 4 is a permitted temporary homeless encampment that has been located in the parking lot of Mary Queen of Peace Church since late January 2020. They were scheduled to move by the end of the month to their next location, which was to be either a church in Bellevue or the Department of Natural Resources land. However, both locations are now unavailable due to COVID-19. Their 19 current residents are facing the prospect of having nowhere to move to when their permit expires on May 23rd, 2020. The city's municipal code contains provisions regulating temporary homeless encampments. Sammamish Municipal Code Section 21A.70.195. The code allows homeless encampments to operate within Sammamish for up to 4 months. Tent City 4's 4-month permit is effective from January 24th through May 23rd, 2020. The governor's Stay Home, Stay Healthy order is currently in effect until May 5th, 2020. For their planning purposes, Tent City 4 needs to determine whether they need to find an alternative location and move by May 23rd, or whether the city can provide an extension should the governor's order be extended further. Mary Queen of Peace has met internally and with Tent City 4 representatives to discuss this matter and has decided to reach out to the city for an extension of 1 month. The municipal code is very specific that homeless encampments are temporary uses, and there are no options for staff to administratively increase the duration of such a permit. Let me read the proposed ordinance. City of Sammamish, Washington, ordinance number 02020 and then we would fill in the blanks if it's so passed. An ordinance of the City of Sammamish, Washington, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, postponing expiration of the tent city in temporary homeless encampment use permit number THEU 2019-00620 for 30 days, providing for severability and declaring an emergency. Whereas the World Health Organization has determined that a pandemic exists due to the global spread of a highly contagious virus, commonly known as COVID-19, and whereas a state of emergency has been declared by federal, state, county, and municipal governments in response to the pandemic, and whereas on March 23, 2020, Governor Jay Inslee issued Emergency Proclamation 20-25, requiring all people in Washington state to immediately cease leaving their home or place of residence except to conduct or participate in essential activities and or for employment in essential business services until midnight on April 6, 2020. And whereas on April 2nd, 2020, Governor Jay Inslee extended the expiration date of Emergency Proclamation 2025 until midnight on May 4th, 2020. And whereas the city regulates temporary homeless encampment use permits under Sammamish Municipal Code 21A.70.195 and allows such permits to be effective for a maximum of 4 consecutive calendar months. And whereas applicants Mary Queen of Peace and Share/Wheel received a temporary homeless encampment use permit number THEU 2019-00620 to locate Tent City 4 in the parking lot of Mary Queen of Peace from January 24th, 2020 until May 23rd, 2020. And whereas the pandemic and the emergency declarations and proclamations are hindering Tent City 4's efforts to find their next encampment location, and whereas the process of moving the encampment to a new location would result in the close contact of campers, organizers, and volunteers, thereby jeopardizing their health and safety. And whereas Mary Queen of Peace has requested that the City Council consider a 30-day extension of Tent City 4's permit. And whereas, should Emergency Proclamation 2025 expire on May 4th, 2020, a 30-day extension would allow Tent City 4 the time needed to complete the planning and permitting processes for their next encampment location. And whereas the City Council wishes to postpone the expiration of permit number THEU 2019-00620 for 30 days until June 22nd, 2020. And whereas the City Council finds that it is in the public interest to adopt this ordinance as necessary for the immediate protection of the public health, safety, property, and peace, now therefore the City Council of the City of Sammamish, Washington, do ordain as follows. Section 1, Findings of Facts. The recitals set forth above are adopted as findings of fact required pursuant to RCW 36-70A-390. Section 2, extension of permit number THEU 2019-00620. The expiration date of this permit number shall be extended 30 days from May 23rd, 2020 until June 22nd, 2020. Severability. Should any section, paragraph, sentence, clause, or phrase in this ordinance or its application to any person or circumstance be declared unconstitutional or otherwise invalid for any reason, or should any portion of this ordinance be preempted by state or federal law or regulation, such decision or preemption shall not affect the validity of the remaining portions of this ordinance or its application to other persons or circumstances. Section 4, effective date. This ordinance, as a public emergency ordinance necessary for the protection of the public health, public safety, public property, and public peace, shall take effect and be in full force on its adoption, pursuant to Matson versus Clark County Board of Commissioners, 79 WN App 641 904 P 2nd 317 1995. Non-exhaustive underlying facts necessary to support this emergency declaration are included in the whereas clauses above, all of which are adopted by reference as findings of fact if fully set forth herein. And then it would be adopted by the City Council at their regular meeting thereof on the 21st day of April 2020. And I give it back to you, Mayor, for deliberation by the Council.
Okay, I have a question right off the bat from Deputy Mayor.
Not a question. I'd like to just move that we adopt this ordinance, which postpones the expiration of Tent City 4's temporary homeless encampment for 30 days.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Is there any deliberation, questions? Hearing none, I'm going to call for the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 7-0. Excellent. Okay, then we're going to go to the next, which is 10.5, I guess, for what it's worth. And this is Pam. I'm going to shoot this to you, and this is to talk about human services.
Thank you. I want to thank the staff or the interim city manager and the staff for providing us with an update on Friday from a number of our community services organizations. And the one question that I have for most of them, actually for all of them, is do we know if they currently have a shortfall to meet the anticipated needs? What we're seeing from all of them is that they have a higher number of requests and payouts and lower donations and incomes. But what we don't know is whether they have shortfalls. We also received in that report that all of our neighboring cities have, in fact, contributed additional monies to the human services providers in their cities. And so I think that we should get some more targeted information if council is amenable to that, to understand what those shortfalls are going to be so that we as a city can do our part to ensure that we are supporting our residents and our small businesses during this crisis. I'm happy to provide some examples if that helps.
Okay, Council, do we have any questions, comments? Okay, Councilman, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I'd like to ask staff some questions. I saw these reports. We have reallocated some funding, which I assume is for 2021, into 2020. And if staff might expand on exactly what those dollars are, where they've gone. It is challenging to, discuss this on the fly. And so the ask, I think, would be for more information so that council can make an educated decision. So, what are we looking at as far as budget impacts here? Is there contingency funds? I mean, we have other contingency funds being used elsewhere in the city too. What do we have still on hand? I know the mayor and I were in a meeting yesterday where we got information from our finance minister. Cities, income levels have altered based on this as well. That impacts our budget. property tax, as an example, typically comes in waves with the April and October 30th deadlines to pay property taxes. However, the governor has delayed when those are due. So the city will have delayed in receiving funds. And so I just want to be sure that we have a good understanding of our cash flows and what contingency funds we might have. That may be, we may not have our finance director there to answer those questions. So I guess that would be questions then that we would need to get answered for our next meeting, unless he just happens to be there.
Mike, do you want to answer some of those questions or any of those questions? Or
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This is Mike Suggs, Senior Management Analyst. We also have Rita Bott, our Community Services Coordinator, on the line. We would definitely be happy to bring back those numbers for you. Regarding your first question about the carry forwards, that is money that was allocated in 2019 for human services grants. And because for whatever reason the city didn't reimburse grantees in 2019, for example, if they didn't meet their deliverable goals that they had stated for whatever reason, we didn't reimburse them the money. So there's some money that council approved of that $325,000 per year in human services grants that didn't go out to organizations for a number of reasons. So there's about $21,000 worth of that that's unspent that we can carry forward from 2019 into 2020. And that is currently going through the carry forward process with finance. I think it's an administrative action that's going to be coming to the interim city manager for approval here in the next week or two. Maybe he can explain that. Yeah, as you mentioned, there's a lot of information in those human services updates that the city sends out. Rita and I and the emergency manager and interim city manager are all in close contact with our community organizations. So we'd be happy to come back with some numbers and some ideas of where that funding could go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gamlin.
Yeah, actually, just reiterating what Councilmember Malchow said. Yeah, we obviously need quite a bit more detail. I'll definitely open for discussion and looking at what's going on with these additional funds. So we'll look forward to getting that information. Thanks.
Councilmember Ross.
Yeah, I'd like to recommend that Mike Suggs follow through with his recommendation. He laid it out pretty well.
Okay, and then I had a couple of comments, and I think I made this the last time that we talked about this, which was trying to find out where are our Sammamish residents going. Are they needing help with rent? Are our numbers going up? Which organizations are they going to? So that when we're talking about which organizations do we fund, do we put money to, where's Sammamish going? Where's the problem? Because I know in talking to Issaquah, where they put extra money was into rent. And they said they may not have done that again because of the, they did it too early. And they said, they probably wouldn't have done that again because the government came out with so much, funding for rent. And then Redmond, they did not have extra dollars. They did what we did. They didn't put anything extra in. They took the allocations that was left over from, last year, moved it forward. They just had, a lot of money that came forward. So, but I would like to know, and not that we would base it just on that, but I would like to know, those would be the organizations. They would know who new has been coming in since if we're going to look at that this is something that has happened from this pandemic, I'd like to know, that would be, if this is pandemic funding, then those would be the places that, we should know where they're going. Okay, and then let me look. Okay, going back. Okay, we're going to start second round. Is there anybody else who wants to talk in the first round? Okay, going to round two. Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, I think all of those are great questions, and I'm glad that we're having such a productive conversation on this. So I do think that Mike's recommendations are great, that he and Rita and the interim city manager can come back with some actual numbers. I'm not sure. Also, if we have, I know a survey was sent out and some results, so if we could get sort of a compiled set of results from the survey that was sent out as well, I think that would be great to kind of get a summary of that, to see where the needs are. And I think, Mayor, that's kind of your point, is where are the needs and how great are they? I think that would be great. So if we could get that, can we ask for that on the May 5th meeting?
Yes, I think we can turn that around for the May 5th meeting.
Okay, great.
Great.
Okay,
thank you so much.
Councilmember Gamblin?
Yeah, I would just like to ask staff, when they're doing their work on this, if they could pay particular attention to anywhere there could be overlap or intersection with other funding directions, whether that's county, state, or federal, so that we would know when we're looking at this funding, is this something unique that only we can provide, or is there an opportunity that there's other funding options available for those specific venues? Thanks.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm gonna need my cheaters. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I think Councilmember Gamblin just asked a great question. I know we had a question that came into council relative to help for small businesses, and Councilmember Stewart mentioned that, but most of the funding that we do is not specific for businesses. It's more for organizations that are helping individuals. So I think understanding, you know, what the state and federal government are doing and who they are able to help. I know another funding package just passed out of the Senate today, the U.S. Senate, that is targeting small businesses again. So I just want to be sure that, you know, we're filling a niche that the feds and the state government are not trying to hit themselves. And if we can identify those, I suspect that is more relative to making sure that people have basic needs like food. And then, again, I just want to be sure that we are getting information coming directly from finance as well, just to understand kind of our current financial position and where we have contingency funds available, and where we may be having shortfalls, because there are certainly shortfalls in our budget considering the pandemic as well. So.
Any other questions, comments? Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, I think that's all great. I want to make make the point that the funds from the federal government and even at the state level, there are so many needs that many of those funds are slow to reach people and have not reached people yet. So the good news about local government is that we may be able to fill a more immediate need until those other funds can arrive. If you look at Issaquah, for example, they've already been able to issue half of the $100,000 that they allocated was depleted by April 14. So I think that while there are funds coming from other government organizations and other levels of government, it is not coming fast enough, and people have needs right now. So if you look at the increase in needs for things like food, that's where I think the local government, that's where we can help, is that we can provide that funding immediately and make sure that no one's going hungry and no one's having trouble with any of their basic necessities that they need right now. So keep in mind that as people lose their jobs, they also lose their health care. So if they had any health issues or they had prescriptions, those are things that they may not have money for right now. So I would just like to point that out. So I think that doing this analysis and doing it quickly is really important.
Thank you. I also want to make sure people keep in mind when we talk about the Issaquah amount, I think I mentioned it last time, I'm going to mention it again, is that the mayor said that the mayor from Issaquah made it clear that she doesn't believe that what they passed would pass now because of the fact that they would have kept in mind the federal guidelines and what was coming down. So I do think we have to look at the entire picture, because they're seeing a lot of changes in Issaquah, and they're having some monetary issues going on, and they probably would have thought in a different direction. Okay, so is there any other comments? Okay, then we will hear back from you. We will hear back from Mr. Sugg on May. Awesome. Okay, moving on to new business. We have an emergency ordinance, and who's going to present this?
Good evening, Mayor Moran, David Pyle, Community Development.
Hi, Mr. Pyle.
So I'm going to break off the rust because I've been sitting in the background here for a while, and whoop, that's not good right there. Phone's ringing right while I come on. So new business number 11 is a proposed emergency ordinance that would extend the shelf life of issued and active building and clearing and grading construction permits that might otherwise experience expiration because of the COVID-19 governor's order work stoppage. So what is presented to you for your consideration tonight is a very specific ordinance that addresses two sections of the city's construction administration code, the clearing and grading administration code and the building administration code. And what this does is it extends the shelf life or life cycle of those building permits for as many days as the governor's work stoppage order is in effect, which took effect on March 23rd. There was additional clarification issued on March 25th. At this point in time, we do not know when that order will be lifted. We do not know how that will affect issued and active construction permits in the city. One of the problems that we have seen in the past and that we learned from the economic downturn of the past decade was that when construction is stopped, it's often put into a period of stress. And we have seen builders walk away from construction projects that we are still dealing with today through abatement. So what this does is it gives builders a little bit of extra time to get the work done where they would otherwise experience a lapse or expiration in construction permit.
Council, do we have any questions?
I do. This is Jason. If you've don't have any other ones.
Okay. Council member, start us off.
Thank you. David, my question is, there have been some projects that I've seen in my walks about and heard about that are essentially not in a position where they would be deemed safe or capped off, or in a position where there is like a big hole in the ground where something might go. Do you put a fence around it? How do you create a sense of safety or of long-term stasis for some of these projects, because we don't know how long this is going to be going on, while that's going to allow some building to go on or some construction crews to be there. So I guess we're trying to find this balance where we're allowing people to, or construction teams to be on site, creating a stopped but safe work zone, and yet allowing that to happen in a safe or, I don't even know how you have, 6 foot, 6 foot, distances between people when you're doing that. How does that balance get struck? I mean, I agree that we need to do something. We can't just leave unsafe environments out and around for extended periods of time. But how do we go about working with master builders or local construction companies, or how does that work? Who's communicating that? Is that part of this ordinance?
Yeah, Councilmember Ritchie, great questions. So we are actively working with, whether it be master builders, whether it be individual builders. We're also working with our neighboring jurisdictions to make sure that the jurisdictions are going at this with a similar approach. So what we're doing is there are two different buckets, if you will. The first bucket is all of those actions that a property owner, a project proponent, an applicant, a permittee, whoever it is, can take to ensure that their site and their project is kept safe. There are 4 fundamental categories within that bucket that we have. The first is what we are calling anti-spoliation, and that is where a builder who might have a project that is partially complete, that risks damaging their investment if they were not allowed to bring it to a point of basically like shutting it down, a point of preservation, excuse me. If they were not able to bring it to a point of preservation, it would be damaged by the elements, vandalism, theft, etc. So that is one thing that they're allowed to do. Another category that they're allowed to do is to shut down a construction site and secure it and make it safe. And that's kind of what you're getting at with a 6-foot trench. They're required to fence it off in order to meet, building code standards. There are limits on what we can require them to do if it's internal to the site, if the site is secure. We mostly look at how the site interfaces with the public. The third category is going to be those emergency type of activities where somebody has a broken water pipe in their home, a roof leak, a tree falls on their house. They're able to get in there and get a permit and pursue construction activity. The fourth category is where they're trying to have all 4 of them in my mind here at one point. They are so anti-spoliation, then we have emergency, we have shutting down the site. There's a fourth one that escapes me. I have to look at the website. Basically, where there's some additional level of activity.
David, wasn't, excuse me for a second, this is Dave Rudat. Wasn't one of them the preservation of plant and equipment?
Well, that goes under anti-spoliation. I'm navigating back to the city's website. I see so much of this all day long that sometimes I get lost in the details. So bear with me for one sec. I got to navigate back to our website because we've put together a lot of really valuable information for the public on the city's Permit Center website. Excuse me. The fourth is really the core of the governor's order, and that is essential projects. So anything that's on the essential list, if you're building a school, for example, then you're accepted from the governor's order. So things that were considered to be essential. So the 4 categories are anti-spoliation or preservation, and that would be what Dave Rudat suggested was preservation of the plant. That's protection of their investment. The second is closure of construction sites, which is where they are allowed to get in there and secure the site, put up the right amount of erosion control, make sure basically that the property and project has been mothballed until they can reactivate the site. The third is emergency repairs, which are where somebody is allowed to fix a water pipe, a roof, et cetera. And the last one is essential projects, which is where the governor specifically allowed for certain activities to continue to occur. So that's that first bucket. Those are things that the city is not enforcing. The state has made it very clear that this is a public health issue. They have created their own reporting website where they are then reaching out to local jurisdictions if they find a problem. However, we have not been asked by the governor's office, by Labor and Industries, by the State Department of Health, by King County Public Health, or any other agency to enforce this at this point. I want to make that really clear that we are not actively enforcing this. We are reactively enforcing it in a way that if somebody is asking for us to do an inspection on a permitted project, we are requiring that they provide us with an affidavit verifying which category their project fits into, if that makes sense. There's quite a bit of information on the city's permit website, the Permit Center website on the City of Sammamish homepage.
Can I just, if Karen, if you don't mind, I just want to clarify, thank you. That's kind of what I was hoping. It's kind of what's said in there, and sorry, just not really understanding. Now I understand what spoilage is. Thank you. But I just want to make sure we're clear that this ordinance does not support any additional construction. It's to make sites safe because we can't build on them, or no one can build on them, or no one can continue construction. how do we make them safe? There's no additional building, there's no additional permitting, there's no additional materials going up or out or around. It's just more of a, how do you keep things safe? And that's just me not being a builder to know what that, what all that entails. But that's really what we're trying to do. Is that accurate? And kind of trying to keep the city safe, right? I mean, that's really the overarching goal here, right?
Well, it's actually the second bucket that we're talking about here. So somewhat correct, but this ordinance really focuses on extending the life cycle of those building permits that are affected by the work stoppage. So the governor said, hey, builders, you have to stop your construction activity because it causes us gathering for the purpose of building or gathering for the purpose of transactions in business, and it's not essential. So you really need to stop this construction activity. And what that does is at the same time they're stopped, their permit timelines are ticking down. So the construction permit is only valid for 2 years per our building code, then it expires. And 2 years, depending on the project, generally is enough time. The purpose of the building code the purpose of the building permit time limit is to make sure that builders are diligent about getting their projects done. We've all heard about those horror stories of someone on your street who took 5 years to build their home and the disruption that it caused to the neighborhood. Well, our building code is designed so that it purposely causes construction to start and get done, right? We should be deliberate about getting your project done. The problem is that they can't deliberately be diligent about getting their project done when the governor told them they can't work. So what this does is it grants an extension to their building permit, so their building permit is valid for as many days, is valid in addition to the normal expiration date. It's valid for as many days as the governor's order had stopped work. So let's say, for example, Councilmember Ritchie, that you were building a new home and your permit was set to expire on November 1st of 2020. And you were halfway through building your home, and on March 23rd, the governor told you that you had to stop work and stop building. You were allowed to do some things in order to protect the building and your investment, but other than that, you were really told to stop work. And let's say that governor's order was in place for the equivalent of 60 days. So say, it went into the middle of May or the later part of May. That's 2 months out of your construction schedule that you've lost. Your permit also still expires on November 1st. So what this ordinance does is it would make your permit expire on what would be January 1st, basically. So it would give you an additional 60 days to finish your work. Those are the same 60 days that you lost because the governor had told you to stop working on your project, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Deputy Mayor.
Thanks. I guess I just have a few questions on the ordinance language itself. So first of all, let's see, it's in section 2 under extensions of clearing and grading and building permits. It says that the permits will be revised based on the number of calendar days construction has been suspended and expiration codified by SMC 16.15. My question is there's been a lot of discussion about phasing construction back in. How will this section B be interpreted if some construction is allowed to move forward, but not all of it?
And this is where it gets really tricky. So I don't know that it's possible to write a clean ordinance that includes a very specific day when the governor lifts an order, because we, like you said, we anticipate that being a phased lifting of restriction. So what we did was we added an additional, additional section 3. So between section 2B, which really targets 1615 0704B and 1620 235-1, which are those sections in the code that specifically call out for 2-year expiration of building and clearing and grading permits. There's an additional section under section 3 that also talks about giving some discretion to the director, and this could also be so the director could be supplanted with the city manager if that was necessary, and not a problem there. It's however we get to that level of discretion, we are asking for some discretion through this proposed ordinance to work with applicants to get an understanding about exactly what you're getting at. When we're dealing with a gray area where something is unclear, we're going to have to navigate through what the impact is on the community and what the impact is on the project in order to understand how we should proceed. There are some projects that it will be pretty clear don't really need an extension. There are other projects that we are really going to want to extend, and we might actually be pushing the applicant to accept an extension, given some of the fallout we saw after the last case. We don't want to be put in the position of abating projects. Abatement is a very costly and complex endeavor, and if we see applicants who are already in a point of stress financially walking away from projects, we will end up being put in the position of abating a project. So what we're trying to do is to help applicants in any way possible keep their project alive so that they don't walk away from them and that they finish them, because a finished project is always better than a half or three-quarter finished project that is what we call a zombie site.
Sure. So a couple more things, and you touched on one of them, which was that this all gets dumped into your lap, David, based on the language of the ordinance. So my suggestion would be that everywhere it says director's interpretation or at the discretion of the director, that we add in there in conjunction with the city manager's office, just so that you're not alone in dealing with what could be a litany of circumstances. The other question that I have, and this may be more for legal, Lisa, Section 7 under expiration, and I did ask this, I don't know if it got filtered or not. It says that the ordinance automatically expires after a period of 6 months, but that could then extend beyond the governor's orders. So I wondered if it made more sense to alter it to marry up with what the governor's orders are on listing restrictions. That way, if the governor's orders, list everything May 5th, which I'm under the impression after listening to them today at 5 p.m. that that's going to happen, but let's just pretend that that could be a circumstance, say June 4th or June 5th. Would it make more sense to tie the expiration to when the governor lifts his orders, so that the council doesn't have to come back and rescind this ordinance if, in 6 months we don't need it anymore? I mean, we could let it go on, but this makes it sound like potentially someone could get an extension when it's not needed if there's not the ability for them to go forward with a clearing and grading permit. Maybe I'm reading it wrong, and maybe you can just comment on that.
Thanks, Councilmember Meltro, Deputy Mayor Meltro. Yes, I do think that there's technically a possibility that the governor's order will extend beyond the 6-month period. Certainly possible. Regarding tying the expiration to the expiration of the governor's order, that's a good idea. I'd like to ask David if he sees any unintended consequences with doing that. I know David was very technically careful in how he wrote this and how I edited it. So I'm going to ask David to speak to that as well. But yes, it's legal to do that, to answer your question, David.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that. This ordinance is limited to those projects that have already been permitted. So what we're doing is we're not considering, so say you are an applicant pursuing a new home permit and your new home permit is issued on May 1st. this ordinance would not apply to you. And the deal there is that you can choose to forego having your permit issued until the governor's order is lifted, and we will hold your permit, at the point of issuance. Until that point, the 2-year time frame that you're up against doesn't start until the permit is issued.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I appreciate the spirit of, Mayor, not a good time. Go, babe. I have a 7-year-old busting into the office. I appreciate the spirit of this ordinance, but I guess what I'm after is if we automatically expire this after a period of 6 months, that means potentially council could have to come back and renew this. And I'm trying to avoid that second step that the council has to take, either by withdrawing it because it's no longer needed, or to renew it because the 6 months has expired. Is it just possible to change the language in there so it is tethered to the governor's orders? So, if it extends beyond 6 months, that we have the ability to do that. Or if it ends prior to 6 months, that it just ends when the governor pulls the orders rather than council having to take additional action.
We would like that to be the case. If the council directs us to do that, and it sounds like legal has indicated that is appropriate to do so, we would very much like the language to read that as you described, Deputy Mayor Malcho.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor, are you done?
I think so. Sorry. My daughter literally walked into the office. Yeah, that was all my questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gamblin.
Yes, thank you, David, for the work you did on this, or are doing on this. Hey, just a couple of quick questions. I think I understand this. So from what I understand, the language that I'm reading this, will the days being added, the matching days being added, be automatically added to all active permits on our in the city of Sammamish at this point? Is it like an automatic, every permit that's active gets those number of days?
Yes, that is how it would function, and that is because they, in essence, are being, if you will, for lack of a better term, robbed of those days because of the work stoppage.
Sure, that makes good sense. I just want to make sure I understood that. Okay, second question. Is there nothing like this from the state of Washington? Is each then city trying to develop this exception for themselves? The state of Washington's not going to come through with something like this for us?
As of yet, they have not. As we saw with the last economic downturn, they were a little late to the game, and they then only mostly addressed subdivisions and short subdivisions through extension of vesting for those types of actions.
Okay, and this is a suggestion. I don't know the specifics on it, but possibly there's something could be in there that if the state comes out with a comparable or similar bill, then we would give either precedent or at least consideration to that. Again, I don't know if that's necessary, but it's something to consider. My last point is one of the things that is stated on the request is, and I quote, authority is also provided to the Director of Community Development and Public Works to extend other permit timelines as needed. So is this inferring that other permits that are non-COVID-19 related, that the Director of Community Development, being you, would like some flexibility in extending those? And could you give me an example of what you're talking about there?
Yeah, one example, and this would be the case of Public Works, might be a right-of-way permit, where due to a work stoppage, a certain action was not allowed to be completed in the right-of-way, and the permit is going to expire. They will have to reprocess. One of the other things we're dealing with this ordinance is it is quite burdensome in terms of clerical efforts for staff. And we don't get a lot of value back in reprocessing these things when we have to reissue permits. Usually it's quite a loss on our part in terms of our efforts. So by extending some of these permits, we're also preventing the staff loss, the time loss, and having to reprocess everything for not a lot of value in return. So that's one side to it. So some of the other types of actions that clause that you cited might allow for is if someone, I'm trying to think of another permit type that would fall in this category. The good news for us is, as compared to some of our counterparts, and I've worked with Bothell and Renton and Redmond on what they're working on their ordinances, and they all have similar ordinances in the works. Renton approved theirs last night, for example. Bothell's was approved last week. So we're all comparing our ordinances with each other. Sammamish's code is a little better off right now because all of those other actions that are not issued an active construction permits, we're already granted quite a bit of discretion in our ability to extend a timeline. But there really has to be a justification given by the applicant. What we're doing with this clause, I believe it's number 3, I have to go back to that page. Section number 3, is regarding against anything coming up that we can't address. And when something like that comes up, then we have to come back to you again with an ordinance and amend it in order to give us some ability to extend something. So what we're trying to do here is not have to spend further time amending this ordinance in the future. And what I would do, or what I believe the Public Works Director would do, is work closely with the city manager's office to determine if the request, a one-off request that we might receive, or something we might identify as problematic, we would work out a reasonable extension for them to keep the project moving and to avoid an unfavorable situation for the city or economic harm to the applicants because of the whole COVID shutdown.
Okay, so the example you gave is a COVID-driven example. So I'm always hesitant on wide-ranging powers. Not that there's any, obviously, distrust of yourself. It's just as a rule, the more tightly written the ordinance is, the happier I am. And giving wide latitude like this is sometimes a little nerve-wracking for me. So I'm wondering, to have a second set of eyes, and if the city manager doesn't have a problem with this, maybe he can chime in. Would it be possible to have on any exception that you're talking about, as we just spoke, that we put in there that at least it would be walked by for approval by the city manager if we were looking for other exceptions?
I think that'd be great. I fully support that. You could actually replace director with city manager. Chances are it would land in my department or, in the Public Works Department. We would work it up to the point where we would bring it to the city manager. I don't see really hardly any of these coming in, but we wanted to be sure that we had some ability to address them if they did come up.
Yeah, and I think that makes good sense, David. You don't want to have to trot and wait for a meeting and have a whole agenda item just for one small exception. So if we could just get that second set of eyes on that, I think I'd be happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, then I have got Councilmember Treen.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Pyle, David Pyle, I believe most of my questions regarding this were questions that were sent already. So I think for me, the big thing is Section 3, and you've addressed it with a couple other council members, because my initial thought was just to strike the whole thing. But if we were to just change the wording from the Director of Community Development and or the Public Works Director and just make it the city manager, knowing full well that these types of things are going to drop down onto your lap anyway. That goes without. We figured you'll do the work. He's not going to do the work, but that would make me feel comfortable on Section 3. And I would do the same thing with sections 4 and 5, where the use of the terms the Director of Community Development and/or Public Works Director on both those sections would be changed to City Manager. It would definitely lead me to want to approve this ordinance. Under the knowing full well that the intent here, the intent of this ordinance is to be fair to everyone who has a permit and they're being affected by the COVID-19 work stoppage, and that is to grant them the time that they've lost on the work site. So my question is, are you comfortable with also not only changing the wording in section 3, but also 4 and 5?
Yeah, I think those are great, friendly amendments. You know, I welcome that. We work really well with the city manager's office, with the interim city manager, Dave Rudette. Have a great relationship with him and look forward to working through any questions that come up with him.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, David Pyle, for your hard work in the looking out for not only the residents, but also other people who have permits out there.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Okay, Council, what is the pleasure with this? Do we want to pass this with what changes?
I'll make a motion. I make a motion that we pass the order with a few changes, one of which has been highlighted, where we put in either the city manager or with the city, in conjunction with the city manager's office. And then also under section 7, that we alter that to be congruent with the governor's lifting of orders rather than a period, rather than it automatically expiring after 6 months.
Second.
Okay, discussion, and I have got Councilmember Stewart.
No, I was going to make a motion. I thought we had to be in the queue to make a motion. Last week I couldn't make a motion without getting in the queue first, but it's fine.
Move to vote.
Councilmember Stewart, did you have any discussion?
No, that's fine.
Okay, well, you just said me, so I thought it was just you had questions. Okay. All right, hearing no discussion, all those in favor of accepting the ordinance with the changes as mentioned by Deputy Mayor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Fabulous, 7-0.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you.
Thanks, you.
David.
Okay, next we've got council reports. And I'm just going to go down the list. You can tell me if you've got a report. Councilmember Ritchie?
No report, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, I've gotten several requests from the community for the assistance, both for residents as well as for our local businesses. So I appreciate that we're going to take a look at that. I also wanted to share with the council that the state legislature, Deputy Mayor Malchow had brought up after our last meeting that the state legislature is going to have a special session. They are right now trying to go through the CARES Act and identify what funding Washington State will be getting and what gaps may still exist. But there's, as I I don't have any of the outcomes of that or a timeline for that at this point in time. But again, there is money coming, but the needs are significant. Just the applications for unemployment, as I don't know if people were aware, but it actually crashed the Employment Services website, and it was taking people several days to actually file for unemployment because the website couldn't handle the traffic. So there are great needs out there. I think it was 350,000 weekly claims were processed. So.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to look, Councilmember Treen.
Nothing to report at this time. Thank you.
Councilmember Gamblin.
Yeah, I don't know whether this is an official report or not, but based on a discussion last week about masks at grocery stores, I did do a walkthrough at the Safeway here, and as per the Safeway manager's discussion before the last meeting, almost everybody staff-wise was wearing masks. I went up to Metropolitan Market, and as per the CEO, Ron Megahan's discussion last week, I saw every single person, every single employee, I should say, at Metropolitan Market wearing masks. So I think that issue's been pretty much settled.
Well, and I want to add that my husband's been to Safeway once and I don't know, some other place once. But he said both places that he went into, everybody, except very few people, were wearing masks. And I stopped at the store after the meeting last week, and there was only one family that did not have masks. So I do think that people are being very cautious. Okay, Councilmember Treen.
I reported already, nothing to report. That's okay.
Okay, Deputy Mayor.
No, I do not have a report.
Councilmember Ross.
Meetings keep getting canceled, nothing to report.
Okay, and I have nothing to report. So on to, unless I forgot somebody, on to City Manager.
Mayor, did anyone want to give a report on our meeting with the school district?
I was going to leave that to our City Manager, but if you want to report, that'd be great.
Okay. No, if he's going to report on that, that's perfect. I just want to make sure someone covered it.
Okay. Okay, well, Pam, why don't you go ahead and cover it?
What I get for asking the question, eh? So we did have a meeting with the Lake Washington School District to really kind of cover off on what's happening with the school district and with the cities in which it serves. And we're kind of cool from there. We did get an update similar to what we're hearing, what we talked about tonight, where in terms of what some of the cities are doing, it sounds like the concerns that I heard, and you guys can chime in, are still, primarily around ensuring that all kids are getting fed. And so the school district is offering free meals to people, as well as the Lake Washington School District Foundation, or the Lake Washington Schools Foundation is still doing pantry packs for families who need food. They're also ensuring that there is childcare for people who are considered essential workers who need to go to work. And they're trying to make sure that there's childcare for teachers who are now being requested to teach online, but maybe caring for their children at home as well. So there are a lot of challenges for the Lake Washington School District. Yesterday was the first day that the online learning started again. Up until now, it's all been review assignments, and there's been no new content covered. So that started yesterday, and teachers are rolling out schedules and lessons and assignments. I believe that the assignments will be handled on a sort of more of a pass-fail type of thing for grading, as opposed to giving specific letter grades or numeric grades anymore. So that's underway, and it sounded like the school district was trying to coordinate that, and they were also working on what, if any, programs could be available this summer for students. I'm not sure if I missed anything there.
I think you covered it really well. Okay, then on to our interim city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I had to follow on to Councilmember Stewart's report there. I had a follow-up meeting that I set up separately with the superintendent that happened this morning so I could better understand the city's relationship with the school district and to better establish a relationship regarding construction, relationships as to how I might assist in figuring out which families in our community might be of need and what information the school district could provide to me. So it was just an expansion of the education we had in our meeting last week. And she introduced by name to me to some of the other members of her staff. And we talk about that her employment with the school district would be coming to an end soon, and some of the people that would be taking her place. So I look forward to establishing further relationships with her before she leaves and her staff. One other thing was, many are aware the decision of the Growth Management Hearing Board was announced yesterday in the case of Don Jaron and the city of Sammamish. We heard that earlier in some public comments. And while it's a very technical and complex issue, I think the city is optimistic that it can address any concerns the Growth Management Hearing Board had identified in that decision. The city staff and the consultants continue to work on many transportation planning projects that it has on its plate. The city is constantly and consistently monitoring the economic and fiscal impacts that COVID-19 is bringing with it. The city of Sammamish will not be as fiscally impacted as many of our neighbors, but we will be. As our sales tax is not nearly as great a contributor to our taxable income base as our neighbors are. And I wanted to be clear in any discussions out there in the community that Sammamish is not considering layoffs or furloughing any of its employees like some of our unfortunate neighbors are having to discuss. Our employees are continuing to serve our community via teleworking and networking from home and keeping us operating at nearly 100%. They do a very, very commendable job. As referred to earlier this evening by our emergency manager, the city continues to lean forward to follow the governor's directive and those issued by King County Health to promote social distancing and no gathering. And our staff, as appropriate, use personal protective equipment and are continuing to do a great job. That's all I have to report this evening.
Thank you. Okay, next we have executive session, and it is on potential land acquisition pursuant to RCW 42.30.110(1)B and potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101I. 30 minutes? And then we're going to... yes, then we're going to come back for discussion on potential adoption of the emergency development moratorium. So let's say 30 minutes. Okay, so we're going to, in between here, we're going to take a 5-minute health and safety. And so council, be healthy and safe, and then click into the second meeting for executive session. And then we'll be back after executive session at 9 o'clock. Okay, discussion. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, moving forward, the next thing that we have on the agenda coming out of executive session is the discussion of adoption of an emergency development moratorium. And I have not read this in its entirety, so I'm going to read it in its entirety. Yes, and could you pull it up on the screen so everybody can read it? Okay, this is an ordinance of the City of Sammamish, Washington, adopting a 6-month moratorium on the acceptance of applications for land use, development, and building permits or approvals within the City of Sammamish, providing for severability, declaring an emergency, and establishing an immediate effective date. Whereas, within the express terms of the Growth Management Act, the Washington State Legislature has specifically conferred upon the governing bodies of Washington cities the right to establish and adopt moratoria-related land use and development applications. Whereas, the City Council continues to seek ways to properly evaluate, appropriately regulate issues, potential impacts, and problems arising in development in the City of Sammamish City under current regulations. Whereas, as one specific but not exhaustive example, on May 23, 2019, the City Council adopted Ordinance Number 0-2019-484 to address concurrency and to amend Sammamish Municipal Code SMC 14A10.10.052 to require that concurrency testing on road corridor and road segment level of service standards are volume to capacity ratios, and to including 1.1 for corridors and 1.4 for segments, and respectively for the city's principal and minor arterials. Whereas, on July 24, 2019, a petition challenging the validity of Ordinance Number 0-2019-484 was filed with the Central Puget Sound Growth Management Hearings Board, captioned Jaron versus City of Sammamish, CPSG MHB case number 0019-3-0015, and whereas on April 20th, 2020, the board issued a final decision and order in Jaron declaring that MSC 14-A 10.052 as adopted in Ordinance 0-2019-484 is invalid and remanded the city for action to bring into compliance by October 30th of 2020. And whereas the city may appeal the Jaron FDO and or may request that in light of current circumstances, the board extend the October 30th, 2019 compliance deadline. However, meanwhile, unless the city acts immediately, there will likely be adverse impacts on the city and its citizens. And whereas, in addition to having received a board's final decision order 1 day ago, the city is required to comply with the governor's Stay Home and Stay Healthy order dated March 23rd, 2020, hereafter order. And whereas city action to replace SMC 14A 10.050 as adopted in Ordinance 0-2019-484 may require assistance from consultants, also subject to the governor's order, and even after expiration of the order, may have to take place in social distancing framework that can be less efficient, particularly when formulating plans and policies. Whereas, facts recited above, in addition to the challenges to the city day-to-day operations resulting from the governor's order, make it imperative for the city council to preserve the status quo by imposing a moratorium pursuant to state statute on acceptance of applications for land use, development, building activities within the city, and whereas, to promote the public health, safety, and welfare, the City Council deems it appropriate to impose a 6-month moratorium on land use, development, building moratorium, and applications. Whereas, the City Council shall hold a public hearing within 60 days of the adoption of this ordinance. Now, therefore, the City Council of the City of Sammamish, Washington, do ordain as follows. Section 1, findings of fact. The recitals set forth above are hereby adopted by the City Council's initial findings of fact in support of the moratorium established by this ordinance. The City Council may, in its discretion, adopt additional findings after the public hearing referenced in Section 5 below. Section 2, moratorium imposed. As authorized by the Growth Management Act, RCW 35A.63.220, A moratorium is hereby enacted on the acceptance of applications for land use, development, and building activities under the following titles and chapters of the Sammamish Municipal Code. Title 19A, Land Division, Title 21A, Development Code, Title 21B, Town Center Development Code, Title 25, Shoreline Management Act, Title 16, Building and Construction, Chapter 1510. Flood damage prevention, Chapter 14A.10, concurrency, and Chapter 13.20, surface water runoff regulations. Section 3, vested rights. The moratorium imposed in Section 2 of this ordinance shall not apply to any rights that have vested prior to the effective date of this ordinance. Section 4, effective duration of the moratorium. The moratorium established in this ordinance shall be in effect for a period of 6 months from the effective date of this ordinance and shall automatically expire at the conclusion of the 6-month period unless sooner repealed. Public hearing. Section 5. The City Council will hold a public hearing within 60 days of the adoption of this ordinance in order to take public testimony and to consider adopting further findings of fact. Section 6. Referral to the city manager. The city manager is hereby authorized and directed to pursue the issues concerning development and concurrency described in the recitals above. The city council requests that the city manager and city staff, along with consultants engaged in the city as needed, work diligently to produce comprehensive plan and coordinate development regulations for the Planning Commission and City Council consideration as soon as possible with the moratorium framework including any extensions. Section 7, severability. Should any section, paragraph, sentence, clause, or phrase of this ordinance, or its application to any person or circumstance, be declared unconstitutional or otherwise invalid for any reason, or should any portion of this ordinance be preempted by state or federal law or regulations, such as decision or preemption shall not affect the validity of the remaining portions of this ordinance or its application to other persons or circumstances. Section 8, effective date. This ordinance is a public emergency ordinance necessary for the protection of the public health, public safety, public property, public peace shall take effect and be in full force immediately upon adoption. Pursuant to a Matson versus Clark County Board of Commissioners 79 application app 904 P.2D 317, 1995, non-exhaustive underlying facts necessary to support this emergency declaration are included in the whereas clauses above, all of which are adopted by reference as findings of fact as is fully set forth wherein. And then adopted by the City Council at the regular meeting, and then it would be dated. Okay. Council. I know we're going to have questions. And I'm looking at my screen here.
Madam Mayor, do you want a motion first?
Okay, so council motion, yes, and I'm not got anything on my chat box here. So who am I hearing? Is that Deputy Mayor?
Yep, I will move that.
Here we go. Okay, so Deputy Mayor, did you make, you're up? And
yes, I'm moving that ordinance.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion, and we have got Councilmember Ritchie.
Wow, first up, right on. So I'll be quick. So we, my understanding after reading the decision is that they are not asking us to have a moratorium. They are asking us to fulfill the invalidated or correct the invalidated sections of our concurrency policy. I don't think we need a moratorium. I have believed that from a while now that the VOC component is not necessary, and that we have, I believe, over 200 different intersections that are AM/PM peak for the intersection level of service. And I think that makes us one of the most restrictive, if not the most restrictive in the state when it comes to regulations and developments and building fees. The board decision gave us a task we have to fulfill, and I don't think we need to have a moratorium to comply with the order. I think we have some time, I believe, till October to show the board that we've done what we need to do to fulfill our obligations. I think we do have some things we can do to fulfill our obligations. I don't think it requires a moratorium. I think our intersectional level of service is more than sufficient in its current standing that was not invalidated by the board to allow us to move forward with concurrency regulations that are very stringent. And I would hope that we can try to move forward with a discussion or action to try to make the changes that we need to without an unnecessary moratorium hanging over our heads. Thank you.
Sharon, can I speak to my motion?
Absolutely.
Wonderful, thank you. First of all, we have 42 intersections, not 200, that are covered under the level of service at intersections. We no longer have a VOC for anything in the city, which means we have an entire minor arterial that is uncovered except for a handful of intersections about the LOS because it was removed from concurrency. We are doing this to fulfill our obligations that the Growth Hearings Board has deemed what the city needs to do to become in compliance, and we can do that by putting in a moratorium so that we can get at our comprehensive plan without allowing development applications to come in and completely obliterate East Lake Sammamish Parkway, even more so than it is now because there is nothing checking it because it was removed from concurrency. So I am adamant that we need this in order to remedy the findings that the Growth Hearings Board said, and I think we can do that under a moratorium so that we can make sure that traffic, and I know that's not an issue during the COVID-19 pandemic, but at some point in the future, we will again have traffic on our roadway systems, and we need a measuring tool for that is adequate. Thank you.
Do I have any other discussion? Oh, hang on. This isn't working. Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, one thing just to point out that the VOC does not apply to East Lake Sammamish Parkway. So this, I don't think, has an impact there. I think the real segments and corridors of concern are along Sahali. But my questions are more around, first of all, I definitely understand that there would be a desire to be able to prevent any new concurrency certificates from being issued until additional adopted regulations can be put into place. I'm not sure that a development regulation is necessary to do that. So that's my first question to legal is there some other way to prevent that from happening as opposed to putting in a full stop on development regulations? And part of the reason why I ask that is that I see here that this moratorium includes things like flood damage prevention, surface water runoff. I don't see any provisions in here to allow for any work that might be needed in case of emergency, for safety issues or repairs, for damages from, storms, acts of nature, accidents. And given that we're in the middle of a health crisis, the last thing I would want is a tree falling through someone's roof and they can't get the appropriate permits to make the repairs that they need to make. And we've compounded some problems there. Same thing with surface water runoff, flood damage, those types of things. I also didn't see anything for if we needed any kind of right-of-way permits, if we have any existing construction projects that have been deemed necessary if something were to come up. So I want to make sure that what we're doing is the right thing to say that, we've had a regulation that we put in place invalidated, and we need a way to make sure that we have time to correct that and not allow anyone to take advantage of that. I get that, but is the only way to do that a full-on development moratorium, which I worry that will put the city into more legal risk, because the Growth Management Board, part of their decision said that they felt that we were not, in alignment with or kind of trying to follow the spirit of the Growth Management Act. And I feel like this is a step in the wrong direction. So I would like to understand if there's some other way to do this that isn't going to put our taxpayers on the hook, because we have taken a step and an action that puts us at greater legal risk, that will incur additional legal fees and potentially damages fees, especially when those funds could be used to help our residents and our small businesses during this crisis. So I don't know, Lisa, if you could address if there's some other way that we could prevent concurrency certificates from being issued short of this what feels like maybe a larger step that needs to be taken.
So thank you, Councilmember Stewart. We did not have a staff report at the beginning of this item, so if you'll indulge me a few seconds to lay a context for the type of moratorium we produced tonight, I'd appreciate it. Yes, there are many different types of moratoria. You had one in 2017 that contained several exceptions or categorical exclusions. The reason that we're asking you to consider the version of the moratorium that's on your dais is because we have had this decision for just a little over 24 hours. I think I received it about 4 o'clock yesterday. It's 46 pages long. There's a lot of material to digest. And so it's always easier to put sort of a blanket or complete stop on everything and scale back once we have a better understanding of the type of development construction activity we'd like to see continue. That is much easier than moving in the opposite direction, which is to start small and continue to add to the moratorium. That's one of the reasons we brought this to you this evening for your consideration. If you would like staff to go back and evaluate some exemptions, and you'd like to give us some direction about what areas those might be, we'd be happy to do that for the 5th. This gives us some time, some breathing room between now and the 5th, and the assurance that we won't have things falling through the cracks that we didn't intend.
So if we do this and there is some sort of an emergency someone has, what are they going to do if we don't have it? So I appreciate that it's easier to start here and apply the exceptions, but given that we're already in the middle of a crisis, how do we ensure we don't compound any crises by not having because we haven't had time, most of us are just now reading this for the first time. I want to make a prudent decision, but I want to make one that doesn't put anyone in jeopardy.
The interim city manager to discuss this a little further, but my understanding is that it takes a couple of weeks at the soonest to get a pre-application conference scheduled with the Community Development Department in Sammamish. Currently, those appointments are at least 2 weeks out. So there's no possible way somebody can come in and get a quote-unquote emergency permit without having this pre-application conference first. So that gives us the time we need between now and May 5th. And I'll stop talking, Dave, so you can add to that if you like.
No, I think, Lisa, you covered the point, unless there's another particular question about that. But procedurally, to get to the pre-app meetings and all that sort of thing, it is at least 2.5 weeks. And there isn't anybody in the pipeline right now, but it would prevent somebody from coming in prematurely.
So I appreciate that, but if I had an emergency where there was a storm, or I had a tree that was about to fall onto my house, or I had a tree that fell onto my roof and I needed emergency repairs, I would still have to wait 2 weeks for a pre-app meeting?
My first response is that an emergency would override all of that, but I'll leave it to legal counsel. But given the latitudes that we have, even under COVID, would supersede and allow us to, or you to, remedy anything like that. It's not a development issue. But Lisa, do you have any comments on what restrictions this might put on our ability to handle emergencies? I don't see any.
Lisa, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, I hit a glitch. I agree with Interim City Manager Rudat. We have some things moving in parallel. We have this proposed moratorium, but also Community Development Director Pyle discussed earlier this evening with you an ordinance that would allow us to continue or extend certain building permits and grading permits during this emergency. I think those that emergency authority would continue. And, you know, I'm not aware of any such emergencies that have happened in the past couple of weeks. It's certainly theoretically possible that we have not thought of something. It's our intention to come back to you by May 5th with a recommendation for the type of moratorium that would allow certain desired activity to continue.
So again, I'm looking at literally, you know, somebody drives their car into a house, or which has happened in our city, or a tree falls on a roof, which happens frequently. How are those things going to have an ability for someone to get the permit they need to make their emergency repairs?
This is the...
Because I don't think the ordinance we discussed earlier covers any of that. That's just for an already issued permit to not expire.
Right, and I would say the mitigation of an emergency is a life, safety, health issue, and it would supersede and override.
Okay. And then the other question is, what kind of legal jeopardy might this put us in when the Growth Management Board decision specifically says that the city's action in adopting our ordinance previously implicated GMA planning goals, which are inconsistent with the goals of the GMA. So doesn't this make us more inconsistent with the goals of the GMA? And does that create some additional legal liability for us? And is there a more narrow way to do what we need to do here?
Certainly those considerations were evaluated when we drafted the ordinance. The ordinance was reviewed and edited by 3 separate attorneys. And it's certainly legally sound, and I'm not concerned about the board's opinion of the moratorium. That said, moratoria generally always carry with it some degree of legal risk. Those risks usually increase with rolling moratoria, you know, one after the other after another. That's not what we're suggesting happen here, so.
Okay. And is there a more narrow way to prevent the issuance of concurrency certificates short of a full-on development moratorium on everything?
I haven't looked into that specifically, but if council direction is for staff to go back and look at that as an option, I will take that direction from you.
Okay, because I mean, again, I'm all for making sure that we don't, you know, that people don't get to get concurrency certificates under a partial concurrency set of regulations. I just want to make sure that we're not being too broad and creating any sort of legal risk. And then the clause in the moratorium that speaks to things that are already vested, can you explain that in terms of what exactly does that mean in terms of where someone might be in the pipeline of what they've, so it says the moratorium imposed in section 2 shall not apply to any rights that have vested prior to the effective date. So if someone, does that only mean that if someone already has a permit, or does it apply to anyone who might be in the process of getting a permit but already has a concurrency certificate?
So under Potala Village versus Kirkland, the case that came out 4 or 5 years ago, the Supreme Court clarified that an applicant vests upon submission of a complete building permit application or subdivision, whichever occurs first, and therefore any applicant whose application is deemed complete but has not yet been issued would be vested, or a subdivision applicant whose subdivision application is complete is vested.
Okay, so this is really not going to stop anybody who's already passed the, I mean, well, I guess that's a question that staff can come back with maybe at our next meeting is, are there people who've passed the concurrency, have a concurrency certificate, so they pass the more strict concurrency tests, but have not submitted a completed application yet? Because that feels like that would be unfair, because I think the intention of this moratorium is to prevent new concurrency certificates from being issued against an incomplete set of concurrency regulations.
Yeah, I don't have that information or those statistics for you tonight, but we'd be happy to get them for you.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Ross.
Thank you. A comment I've heard tonight and from some in the public is the misconception that the Growth Hearings Board invalidated our concurrency process or our concurrency methodology, I'll say it that way. We have an intersection level of service, and by reference to an ordinance, the segment B over C details. What the Growth Hearings Board is asking us to do is to integrate it into the comprehensive plan. So we have, it's in substance, it's been supported by the Growth Hearings Board, but not in form. That's the first point I want to make. The second point, no possible way an applicant, I've heard no possible way by professionals over the last 2 years and been surprised that it was to the contrary. So I'm very concerned about, I really think the right thing to do at this point is to do a blanket moratorium. I think the lawyers got together and did a fabulous job under a short period of time to put this together. And then May 5th, discuss exclusions at that meeting. So from now until May 5th, we'll have some public, opportunities to contribute to those ideas, and we can have public comment as well, so that we have a more methodical review of those exclusions and update the blank with any exclusions, such as building schools, items like that, or personal, someone's updating their personal residence and so on. So those types of exclusions we can address later. But right now, tonight, I like the work that the attorneys have done together, and I fully support this.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I think Lisa touched on a lot of the points I was going to make. But specific to categorical exemptions, we can narrow this a little bit more at the May 5th meeting. And if for some unforeseeable reason something comes up that we did not anticipate, we always have the ability to call an additional meeting prior to that to address something. But I think Councilmember Ross just said, things that we will want to probably add in some of those categorical exemptions, one of which being schools, which Councilmember Ross just mentioned. If the school district, for example, is attempting to build elementary school number 16, that's something that I think we probably all recognize we need in our community to deal with a lot of the growth we've had. And there will be other things like hazardous trees for removal and replacement of those. And there'll likely be other things that we want to add in. But I think right now we cast the net wide and we pull it in as we inevitably will get public comment, and we can digest that comment so that we can come up with categorical exemptions to this that make sense while we do the work.
Okay, council members that we haven't heard from, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Not at this time.
Okay, well.
Councilmember Gamblin here. I think Councilmember Malchown and Councilmember Ross have covered my question. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to comment from hearing everything all evening that it looks like the VRC is going to be the whipping post. And I want to say that people should go and read for themselves that, you know, the SWAT we got was for the fact that we didn't include it in the comp plan and we were told to go back and do that. So let's not make it more than it is. It's bad enough we didn't put it in the comp plan, we have to go back and do that. So the fact that it's going to be the whipping post is just kind of pathetic to me. That's my comment. Okay. We have a first and a second on the floor. Is there any more comments? None being heard. Those in favor of passing the moratorium, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Is that one or two? Okay. Can I clarify, Jason? Was that? I know that was you. Is there anybody else besides Jason?
I only heard one nay.
Okay. 6-1. All right, council. Let me see if there's anything else that I have. Is there anybody who's got anything for the good of the order?
I move to adjourn.
All right.
Second.
Everybody be safe. All in favor, say aye.
Aaron.
Aye.
Aye.
Good night.
Good night, all. Good night.